welcome to the conference. This is the WAP conference, Strive, Survive and Thrive, which is a very important issue for all of us, I think, at the moment. Wiltshire Arts Promoters aims to foster the strength of the cultural sector in Wiltshire through unity and collective learning, I think. And this today hopefully will be about collective learning. We all need to be relevant and an integral part of the communities that we operate in. And I think we've got some very interesting speakers this morning who will talk to us on several different levels. On a strategic level, we'll hear from Simon Eden, Chief Exec of Winchester City Council, about how the arts are a centre of the economic and cultural life of the city of Winchester. We'll hear from Paul Goddard from the Arts Council about how the Arts Council are helping to support a lot of work in this field. And then we'll hear from lots of different deliverers about how they are finding ways to survive and thrive in these difficult times. So I hope you all find some useful advice, models, networking opportunities today. So without further ado, I will introduce Simon Eden to talk to us about how things are done in Winchester. Thank you. Simon.
Good morning. Simon Eden, Winchester City Council. I think I got things in the right order there. It's, as it says there, Chief Executive at the City Council of Winchester. My credentials for being here and talking to an audience of arts professionals. I'm a zoologist. I have a PhD in animal behaviour. I've worked as an executive director for development at Southampton City Council. I was a civil servant before that, working on local government finance. So really I'm the obvious person to talk to such an audience about the importance of arts. I think what I can bring and what I will try and bring to this discussion is a chief executive's perspective, an outsider's perspective of where the arts can contribute. And what I want to talk about this morning is, I think, the new world that chief executives, that members, that councils are working in, and how you need to be part of that world. You need to understand what drives that world, and you need to understand the language we use within that world if the arts are to continue to be part of our whole agenda in local government, the public sector, whatever, going forward. I think Tracy gave me that title. I don't think I volunteered it. And I'd start by putting a question mark. Of course the arts are an option. Everything is an option to councils these days, to chief executives looking at balancing budgets and we all know making reductions in services as well. Even the so-called statutory services are options. We've got choices as to how we do them. So I think the question actually becomes slightly different. And the point I really want to address this morning is whether the arts are a luxury or not. They're a discretionary service, sure, but I think our discussion has moved beyond discretionary and statutory services. Are the arts a luxury? Are they something we can afford in the current climate? The arts is a great phrase, isn't it? We all have a version of what the arts means. And I've tried to come up with a couple of short phrases that hopefully capture what I mean. And they're quite generic, they're quite general. And I think one of the themes you will find from this morning is the imprecision of definitions and how we should be exploiting the imprecision of definitions to the full. So that's a pretty imprecise definition of the arts. Ways of engaging, informing and entertaining our communities, that can be 101 things. And some people might not recognise those as the arts. Ways of enhancing the quality of life, well that again can be 101 things. Is it the arts or not? Well, let's leave ourselves with that uncertainty. So are the sort of things that do that for our communities, are they a luxury? And it's worth emphasising that word communities as well. That's where chief executives, that's where members come from. Our job is to provide services to our communities, to balance budgets, to meet obligations and targets, and hopefully in some sense, as we're doing all of that, to struggle to improve the quality of life in those communities. So it's making a link between that idea of quality of life and some of these things, the struggle we're doing, and the arts, whatever the arts is. I think there's a second thing we're trying to do, as well as looking at whether the arts are a luxury. We're also trying to ask the question, well, does that merit subsidy from the public purse? Does that merit public money being put into it? And I think to make a case for the arts, as defined, we need to think about the changing role of local government, the changing expectations and the changing perceptions of local government, some of which have come from the centre, some of which we're setting ourselves. That was performance art, I think. Our world, local government's world, is characterised by a whole maze of imprecise definitions. And I think the imprecision of those definitions, as I said a moment ago, is really, really helpful to us. We've done the what is the arts bit, and I think that comes straight back to perceptions. But there's another phrase that we tend to use very much as well. We talk about communities, of course, but we talk about, and we seek to build, we seek to develop, we seek to promote sustainable communities. Now, there's 101 definitions of that word as well. But I think it's something about those sustainable communities being places which are good places to live, to work, to play, to visit. And crucially these days as well, of course, to invest in, to attract growth, development, business, and I know the arguments about the word development, but let's again use that fairly broadly. Good places to be. Sir Michael Lyons, in his report, 5 years ago now, told us that local council's responsibility is to shape places, to build communities. And that idea of shaping places, creating character and identity is a really important thing, which I think is something that we can start to exploit for looking at what role the arts might play in our communities. Because we know that places are not just created by roads, houses, by industrial estates. They're created by cultural activity, by arts, by heritage, sports and recreation, those 101 things which turn it from a location to a place to a community. I'm talking about Winchester. As Clare said, I'm talking about Winchester. And just a couple of examples of where we in Winchester have used the arts to help create character. That's in the crypt of the cathedral at Winchester. It's an Anthony Gormley statue. And the crypt in Winchester, Winchester's cathedral is built right on a sort of boggy area that used to be the floodplain of the river. And it floods regularly. And you get this beautiful reflection of the statue in the water, the still water, if you go down to the crypt. If you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to go. Now, that's a piece of art that's perhaps slightly surprising in the middle of a cathedral, and Anthony Gormley in the middle of a cathedral, which we use to encourage people to visit that cathedral. We use it in marketing material and things like that. So that's one area where we've tried to use the arts culture to bring people in. Another area has been in one of the side streets of Winchester. I don't know how many of you know Winchester. We've got a lovely central paved high street, which is very successful. A lot of little roads go off it, where people say, the shopkeepers say, well, nobody comes down here. They don't know we're here. And the city council needs to do 101 things, from sort of doing all their marketing for them through to putting in small conveyor pavements that will actually take people down there. And what we've done in one of those side streets, which has got a really good range of interesting little shops, we've just put a piece of art above there, the kite flyer, as we call it. We commissioned that competition with a local artist producing that. And that just, the view you've got is actually a gap between a W.H. Smith's and a Phase 8 shop. People walk up the high street, they see that gap, they look down it, they see that, and they go down there. And by putting that piece of public art in, we were able to demonstrate a real and genuine increase in footfall down that street, simply because, and the only difference was that. So that encouraged people down there. So you can start to use the arts, and we've tried to use the arts, to create that sense of character, that sense of place, to attract people. And again, that gets used in marketing material, and increasingly we get people saying that one of the things they've come to Winchester for is to see that, because they've heard about it. They've heard about the kite flyer. I hope it's reached Salisbury. But it's part of the way we use to attract people. So arts, culture, part of place. Well, you know that, of course, because I'm preaching to the converted here. And I think most of our elected members, and I gather we have an elected member here this morning. I think, yes, it's the other one in the tie. I thought it probably would be. Welcome. Most elected members, certainly the portfolio holders in these areas, get this point, and most chief executives get it as well. And that's why in the past we continue to subsidise theatres, to grant aid exhibitions, to give grants to small arts groups and so on and so forth. But the problem is, I think, in too many cases, we still see those grants, that support, as discretionary. We still see it as something of a luxury. Until we start to change the language. And the first bit of changing the language has been that conversation about place. We have a conversation about place in Winchester. Suddenly putting up a statue like that is not a luxury. It's not something we can do if we've got a bit of spare budget. It's an essential part of the development of that little bit of our retail economy in Winchester. It's an essential part, as the Gormley is, of our marketing of Winchester. And I don't know how many of you have, who went up to London over the summer. And if you did you notice the marketing campaign that Winchester, the council and the businesses had at the station to encourage people to come to Winchester, which was actually successful, and we did all the surveys to prove that people had seen it. And one of the images we used was that Gormley to attract people down to Winchester. So you start to use the arts in a cravenly commercial way, in a sense. You talk about the arts in the context of place.